years after knocking out GameCube owners with Super Smash Bros. Melee, the team at HAL Laboratory came out swinging again, only this time with a racer based on Nintendo's original jiggly pink puff. This is Kirby Air Ride, released for the Nintendo GameCube in 2003, although the game was originally announced in 1996 for the Nintendo 64. And as a 7-year cycle of development and redevelopment might suggest, this game feels like a collection of ideas with no sense of purpose or direction, like a title Nintendo just wasn't sure what to do with. No matter how hard Kirby spins, that's something he just can't shake. Of course, he can't shake the influence of his handlers either. HAL Laboratory has been developing Nintendo's Kirby and Smash Bros. Franchises for years, and in Kirby Air Ride, their experience is clear. Structurally, the game is very similar to the Smash Bros. Games, especially the GameCube's Melee. From the modes and records to aesthetic touches like the visuals, menu layouts, and music, it's clear that Kirby Air Ride was crafted by a, master hand. In fact, Melee and Air Ride seem to share a few development philosophies as well. Both games are designed with simplicity in mind. Only a few buttons are used in the controls, but the idea is that simple, accessible control schemes can enable a deep game. That depth comes not from complex controls, but from refined and well-designed gameplay. The difference is that Melee justifies that approach. Air Ride doesn't. Kirby Air Ride is played using the analog stick and the A button exclusively. You won't push a single other button while playing this game. Controlling the game was meant to be as simple as possible, and though the simplicity is refreshing, the mechanics the controls are built around bring Air Ride crashing to a halt. Let's start with the start of the race, for starters. No buttons are required to accelerate. Kirby presses the gas pedal with no assistance from you, and that takes a bit of time to get used to. Holding a button down to race has sort of become instinctive, and at first it's really tough to train yourself not to do that. But even that's not too big of a deal. You get that down eventually, and finally you're racing. You approach a turn, you try to drift, and that's when you find the game's real twist. See, pressing A isn't the gas, it's actually the brake. And if you want to boost around a turn, you don't simply drift into it. You have to slide into it with your brakes. Of course, the hook is that braking charges a speed boost and releasing the brakes uses it, but that never feels useful, at least not as much as a normal drift as utilized in virtually every other racing game would. There just doesn't seem to be much of a point to that design choice, and doing things differently for the sake of being different rarely yields good results. Kirby Air Ride has an interesting control philosophy, but the gameplay mechanics just don't hold up their end of the bargain. Plus, this is just nonsense. Everyone knows hoverboards don't work on water. Kirby, you hoverboard noob. Of course, the game does do a few things right. Namely, the course designs are unique among Nintendo racers. In fact, they're like a combination of the colorful and lively tracks from Mario Kart and the twisting, branching courses of F-Zero. There are rails Kirby can glide on, there's warp stars to find, and the game moves at a notably faster pace than you might expect. And all of that stuff is great, but even some of the things Air Ride does right, including offering 3 different racing modes, suffer from clunky execution. Standard Air Ride races are complemented by the multiplayer-focused modes Top Ride and City Trial, but Top Ride is kind of tough to control, and though City Trail is arguably the game's best choice for multiplayer, it also suffers because the game's weapons aren't implemented all that well. To the game's credit, and in classic multiplayer fashion, there are plenty of 4-player modes and even support for LAN options, but there's not much incentive to actually use them. Kirby's first foray into racing isn't awful or anything, but it's held back by its own forced limitations. And it's disappointing. The combination of mascot racing and Kirby's enemy-swallowing abilities could have yielded a real burner on the racetrack. But in every sense of the phrase, Kirby Air Ride drifts on autopilot.